Why do you think that the framers sent the constitutions to the states with neither an endorsement nor a condemnation? Was this a wise decision? Why? Why not?
Well, when they proposed the Constitution to the Confederation Congress, Richard Henry Lee didn't necessarily give his full approval of the Constitution that James Madison wanted. But even so, he said that, well, you can go ahead and present it to the states, and we'll see after their reaction to the Constitution, we'll see if it'll truly succeed. So I think that while James Madison didn't get everything he wanted from the Confederation Congress, they didn't necessarily reject the proposed Constitution either.
I believe that the Confederation Congress had to understand the dire situation that we were in under the Articles. Following Shays' Rebellion, we saw that there was no domestic tranquility, and the Congress was struggling to collect taxes and troops, and they didn't have the power that they needed. So although this new Constitution changed the government, I think they understood that it was necessary.
So what happened in New York? I mean, New York elects a predominantly anti-federalist group to the convention, and yet in the final analysis it passes barely, but it's ratified. What do you describe that?
Well, noted constitutional scholar John Kaminsky actually said that nowhere else were the people as well informed about the Constitution as in New York. You have these Federalist Papers and the Anti-Federalist Papers that were published in columns in the New York newspapers. And that incited these very fierce debates where they went over the Constitution clause by clause. So although you have these powerful figures such as George Clinton, I believe that the Federalists were able to counter their arguments very successfully through their Federalist Papers.
Also, I think that New York realized that if they didn't join the Union, if they didn't ratify the Constitution, they would be left out and other states would join the Union by themselves. And they wouldn't have the benefits of being able to trade with the other states. And so they did realize, after, as Brittany said, going over all the arguments between the Anti-Federalists and the Federalists, that would be to their benefit to ratify the Constitution.
So you think the result in New York would have been different if New York had voted earlier than it did?
I believe so. However, if you look to the New Hampshire Convention, it met in February, and the Madisonian supporters there realized that there weren't enough votes to secure success in that convention, so they convinced the Anti-Federalists, whether the Anti-Federalists realized what was going to happen or not, that they should postpone the ratification convention and that they should meet again later. And that's why New Hampshire was the 9th state to ratify. They moved the convention to June when they eventually ratified on June 21st. They moved the convention until they were certain that they had enough votes to secure ratification. I believe the same thing may have happened in New York, possibly.
In looking at the process of conventions ratifying as a precedent, was that followed in adopting the amendments to the Constitution, the 27 that we've passed so far?
I think you can trace it back to the 17th Amendment, where you have a direct election of senators, because you have these people under the original Constitution, they would elect the House, and then you have the people elect.
But what I'm talking about is now the ratification process of adopting the amendments that have been proposed. What process did we use in adopting those amendments?
Well, in adopting those amendments, the Constitution sets forth in Article 5 the process in which either Congress or the states can propose an amendment, and you need the same 3/4 ratifying benchmark that was required for the Constitution. The Constitution actually required 9 out of 13 states, but that's about 3/4, and that's what's used for amendments today.
Did they use conventions to ratify, or did they use legislatures to ratify the amendments?
We haven't really seen the people actually propose the amendments themselves, even though that's an option under the Constitution. So,
Why did many writers use pseudonyms in ratification debates?
well, I believe you have the Federalist Papers, they run under the pseudonym Pluvius, and I think that was essential, and so that the people didn't have these preconceived notions of Hamilton, Madison, or Jay in the Federalist Papers. And you have the Anti-Federalist Papers, you have Robert Yates writing as Brutus, and I believe that was very significant because they were just reading these ultimately non-biased perceptions of the Constitution, and they can't say, well, Madison always says this, so I'm just not going to read this Federalist Paper anymore. And I believe that was crucial to the success of the Federalist Papers.
And by using the pseudonym Publius, Madison, Hamilton, and Jay were trying to come across as a friend of the people by using this name that would have been familiar to the people in the states at that time. So it did give greater legitimacy to their argument than if they were the 3 men who had come out of this constitutional convention touting their successes there.
Why would the name Publius be familiar to the people at the time?
It was from the Roman Republic, I believe.
One very honest one, I mean, it's okay we would call spin. I mean, here you had these 3 aristocrats wanting to hide the fact that they were aristocrats? Does that bother you at all?
Well, Madison actually did not want to take part in the Virginia Ratifying Convention. He said that it should only come from the hand of those who did not have any part in proposing or writing the Constitution. And so he believed that that was how it would be legitimized by the people, as if the people, the aristocratic people who were in the Constitutional Convention, didn't really play a part in the ratification debates themselves. So I think that was kind of says a lot about his opinion on it.
And I don't think it bothers me either, just because, I mean, they were wealthy landowners, they were aristocrats, but they clearly had the people in mind when they wrote the Constitution.
Although they may have been aristocrats, however, some of the framers were not even that. Hamilton was fathered by someone who was not married to his mother. He was then orphaned at the age of 13 before he was sent to King's College. So they didn't all have an aristocratic background. However, they did understand that they needed the legitimacy that would be offered by popular ratification. Writing as Publius in Federalist 40, Madison explained that the Philadelphia draftsman had merely proposed a constitution of no more consequence than the paper on which it was written, unless it was stamped with the approbation of the people to which it was addressed. So he realized that this was a constitution for the people. It was not a constitution for an aristocracy. So they needed to present it to the people in a way that they would understand this constitution that was laid before them.